Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for kicking it with me today. My name is Cami. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. For quite some time, I've had the idea of starting a crime channel. I watch a lot of crime stories on a number of different channels. And one thing I noticed was that everyone tells the same stories. Not that it can't be interesting to hear the same stories told from different perspectives, but I wanted to do something different. Just doing research, I realized that there are so many, unfortunately, that there are so many unalivings or have been so many unalivings in my hometown. I'm from a small town called Jackson, Michigan. When people ask me where it is, I always say it's 1 hour away from DTW, which is the Detroit Metro Airport. And halfway in between DTW and Jackson is Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is. So that being said, there's a lot of murders that happen in Jackson. As a matter of fact, I was looking at the news today and someone was just sentenced for unaliving the mother of his child. They had, I believe, 4 children together. So there's a lot of stories that I'm going to be just going back, researching, and telling. So the idea behind this channel is that I'm going to exclusively tell stories from Jackson, Michigan. At least start by telling stories from Jackson, Michigan, or Jackson County, I guess you could say. I'm starting my channel off with this story. I don't even know if it got any coverage outside of our hometown. I know if this would have happened now, like when there's TikTok and YouTube and all these social media outlets, this would have been plastered everywhere. This story happened in 1998. Going back and doing my research, there was hardly any newspaper articles about it. Before I get started, I just want to say that all the information that I'm including in this video is information that I've just looked up on Google, things I've stumbled across on social media. Everything that I'm mentioning here today is all information that is publicly available. And again, this is all anybody talked about, whether you were at school, church, and out in public. Everyone was mentioning the story because it was so shocking, and it still would be shocking today, but it was especially shocking for our hometown. And I do want to say that by telling the story, my intention is not to bring any additional distress or emotional trauma to the loved ones of the victim. This is something new that I'm doing, so I'm kind of just winging it. So I know this might not be the best quality. Definitely will be room for improvement, but you have to start somewhere. So I'm starting here today. I was unable to find an exact date of birth for her, but Stacy Lynn Davis was born to her parents, Sharon and Ricky Davis, in 1984 in Jackson, Michigan at Foot Hospital. Roughly 4 years later, they had a son, her little brother Travis. By all accounts, and I do mean all accounts, they were the ideal family. At the time of her death, her father worked in the purchasing and materials department at Consumers Energy there in town, and her mother worked as an executive secretary at a company in Jackson. At the time of her passing, she was an 8th grade student at Parkside Middle School. I was able to locate an article in the paper where her father was interviewed, and they were out at a festival in town. At the time, Stacy was 7 and his son Travis was 4. He was out with his wife, and he was just talking about, what a great time that they were having. They were at a local park where I guess he was watching his children play, and he made a note that, I used to play at this same playground, as a child. Not to sound cliche, but this is not the type of family that you would have expected something this tragic to happen to. I don't know if they still do this, but our local newspaper used to go to different schools, and a teacher would select a student out of their class as the class act. So I'm sure it was one of those students that excelled, they were well behaved, just a student that set themselves apart. In my research, I found that both Travis and Stacy Davis were selected as class acts. So I think that says a lot about their upbringing, and it shows how great of a job their parents were doing with them. As a sixth grade student at Frost Elementary School, Stacy was selected as a class act, and her teacher described her as a hard worker who always put forth 100% and was a wonderful friend to others. She enjoyed reading, writing, was part of the drama club, was the school's credit union manager, and was also treasurer of the student council. And this is at the age of 12 as a sixth grader. Safe to say she sounded like a very motivated student and was a go-getter. At the time of her passing, she was 14 years old and she was an eighth grade student at Parkside Middle School. Apparently, every day after school, she used to take the bus home. But on Thursday, September 10th, 1998, she decided to walk home with a group of friends. She made it home safely. Even one of her girlfriends even waited there till she got in the house. When she walked through the back door of her house, she was carrying her clarinet and a bottle of soda, and she was attacked. Stacy was ultimately stabbed 33 different times, and her killer used 3 different steak knives. According to the pathologist, she was stabbed 22 times in her back, 9 times in her chest, and twice in her arm. At the time, her brother was a sixth grader at Frost Elementary School, and his school got out a little bit later than his sister's. So he arrived home maybe an hour or so after her, and as he went to walk in the back door, he saw blood, got scared, and went and found a neighbor. Thankfully, the neighbor went back over with him but didn't go in. They saw the blood, and I guess they called Stacy's father. He came home from work, and he's the one that actually went in the house and discovered his daughter. According to reports, he called 911 at about 4:08 that afternoon and did compressions, but it sounds like she had already passed away. According to the medical examiner, it sounded like she was alive during her attack. I don't know for certain, but it sounds like she might have passed away because she bled out. After this happened, the family never returned back to that house. As you can imagine, it was just like a cloud over the city. That's all people were talking about. The entire community was just blown away. No one could believe it. No one could understand who possibly could do something like that. A 14-year-old girl, her life just brutally taken. It didn't make any sense. Her funeral was held the following Tuesday, and I think over 1,000 people showed up to pay their respects and mourn her loss. In the meantime, the police were doing everything in their power to figure out why this happened and who did it. So the police were canvassing. I'm sure they were up at the middle school asking students about her, maybe if someone disliked her. I'm not sure how it went. All I know is one of the detectives happened to see a little boy at Parkside who appeared to have blood on his shoes. This was the day after the funeral. This was Wednesday. So they confiscated the shoes, probably did some testing. At 11 p.m. on Wednesday evening, they arrested Stacy's next door neighbor, 13-year-old 7th grader Martez Stewart, for her murder. And when I say next door neighbor, I mean next door neighbor. The Davises lived at 903. Stewart and his family lived at 905. As you can imagine, the next day the city was just, it was, again, a 14-year-old was stabbed to death in her home, and then a 13-year-old was ultimately arrested for that brutal crime. A little bit about his family background. He has a younger brother who was roughly the same age as Travis at the time, who I guess would play with Travis and Stacy. Martez had actually been banned from playing at the Davis home because he had beat up Travis at some point, probably for no reason. His mother is Michelle Powell, and his dad was Kim Stewart. At the time this happened, his father was incarcerated in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I'm not sure her occupation at the time. It said she was a former corrections officer. Sounds like he lived in the home with his mom, his younger brother, and his stepfather. Reporters were interviewing neighbors because everyone was on edge after this happened. Even the killer's mother raved about the Davis family. I found this really eerie because at the time she did not realize her son had committed the murder. And I guess his mother recognized that something was going on with him and she tried to get help for him, but because he hadn't committed any crimes, she was kind of turned away, which is a whole nother issue. So she recognized something was wrong. He needed help. She tried to get him counseling. But again, he didn't have a criminal record at the time. So it's like, sorry, we can't do anything for you. They interviewed his father's mother. She also recognized that Martez had something going on. I'll read her quote exactly so I don't get it wrong. Her name was Greta Stewart, and she said there was something that wasn't quite right about that boy, but he was never any problem. I think he had schizophrenia or something, but his mother never got him checked out. I just didn't think he could do something like that. And actually, everyone that was interviewed, at least for the paper, was saying, even students were saying, like, he was this and he was, maybe a bit of a troublemaker, but no one saw that coming from him. And even though the grandmother said his mother didn't get him help, his mother claims that she attempted to, but was turned away, which I've seen be a reoccurring pattern in some of the crime stories that I've watched or listened to, where a parent, they know something is not quite right, but the system just rejects them until things blow up. And by then it's too late because someone has been harmed. Something's happened that can't be undone, which is unfortunate. A little bit about Martez. At the time of the murder, Martez Stewart was a 7th grade student at Parkside Middle School. He was 13 years old. Apparently, the year before, he had a teacher that did not want him to go to Parkside. That teacher felt like he should go to the alternative school, but I don't know if there was some sort of conference or hearing. Ultimately, he was allowed to go to Parkside. There's reports that I guess he would get into fights a lot. I don't know if he tried to act tough, what the situation was. One news article, there was a girl who was saying that he tried to talk to a lot of girls even though they didn't want to talk to him, and it sounds like he would maybe get upset when he was rejected. The rumor was that he liked Stacy. She didn't like him back. I guess she didn't want to be his girlfriend, and people are saying that's why it happened. There's not really a clear reason as to why he did it. Obviously, there's nothing that would justify him doing it. Any reason given would have been illogical, nonsensical, and unacceptable anyways. I think the real danger is that there was no reason given, and that is one of the arguments that were put up when people were saying he should be let out at the age of 21. He can be rehabilitated. Yeah, no. I don't know if anyone besides him knows why he did what he did. Apparently later on, once he got locked up, he admitted that he had broken into cars and things like that, but he had never got caught for any crimes before. He just didn't have the best reputation at school. So like I mentioned, they arrested him Wednesday night, the day after her funeral, about 11 p.m. at his house, based off of the bloody shoes. And the detectives saw Martez at school with the bloody shoe prints. They ultimately took him back home to his house. And initially, the mother didn't want them to search or didn't allow him to speak to him, but they told her they were getting a search warrant. So she let them search. And the police ultimately found a pair of bloodied boxer shorts in a grocery bag in the garage, a pair of his bloody gym shorts, in a grocery bag in a cabinet in their basement. A DNA test was done, and the blood on both the boxer shorts and the shorts were Stacy's. They also fingerprinted him, and his fingerprints were on the knife that they found on the counter and in the wastebasket in the Davis's home. Once he was arrested, because of his age, there was a lot of discussion and debate, and people were really split. Some people felt like that was an adult crime. He should be charged as an adult. And then there were people on the side, well, he can be rehabilitated, maybe when he turns 21, we can let him back into society and he can be a productive member of society. As a matter of fact, a year before this happened, in 1997, the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that juveniles could not be tried as adults. So ultimately, he went to trial. Like I said, there was a lot of debate on whether, how he would be tried, whether he would be tried as a juvenile or he would be tried as an adult. I'm going to try to keep my opinion out of this, but for someone that young to break knives off into someone and pick up another one and keep going 33 times, I don't really think there's any hope for rehabilitation. I believe one of the prosecutors in the case mentioned, if he was to get out, would you want him to live next to you? Me? No. If you're capable of doing something that egregious that young, I don't really think there's any hope for you. You can have empathy for someone, but I don't think there's any hope for you. As a matter of fact, before they found out it was him, he kneeled next to a memorial for Stacy with his teacher and prayed. Whole time he was the killer. And he was 13. That's what is the word that's as they say, diabolical. You can't. His grandmother felt like he was schizophrenic. There was something happening. And unfortunately, that young, there's not a lot of hope. You're going to have to be in a cage for the rest of your life. And ultimately, that kind of is what happened. And I'll follow up on the kinda. A bench trial was held. It was a 2-day bench trial, and he was found guilty of second-degree murder. Her father, mother, family, I don't think they ever really said anything. I don't think they ever gave any interviews or anything like that. But at sentence, he got up and he finally spoke. And one of the things he said was that he wanted punishment to fit the crime. Because so many people were saying he's young, there's still hope for him. He said he wanted punishment to fit the crime. And thankfully, they did sentence him as an adult. And despite people, arguing for either a delayed sentence or a blended sentence of sorts that would see him getting out at the age of 21, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The prosecutor said that they would be at every single parole hearing doing their best to ensure that he, in fact, was not paroled. At this point, Martez has been locked up in the Michigan Department of Corrections for the last 27 going on 28 years. He is known as prisoner 292877. In 2024, the Supreme Court ruled that juveniles cannot be sentenced to life, even with the possibility of parole. And so not only him, but so many other juveniles across the United States who had life sentences or life sentences with parole were resentenced. September 12th of last year, Martez was resentenced, and he was resentenced to 40 to 60 years because he's already been in there for 27 years. So he was given 27 years credit. Because of his resentencing, he is now actually eligible for release as early as December of 2032. So that's actually right around the corner. And his maximum out date is in 2049. So if my calculations are correct, at the age of, I think, 63, regardless, he'll walk out of the prison gates. If you ask me, 63 is still young. 63, you're not, I mean, some people are, but you're not broken down and unable to do anything. And if his mindset has not changed, that's like I believe the prosecutor said before, would you want him living next to you? But because of his resentencing, he can get out as early as 6 years from now and no later than 23 years from now, which would put him in his early 60s. His father is no longer incarcerated, and I found his Facebook page and he posted a photo. Apparently, Martez must have gotten his GED since he's been in. I really don't have much else to add about him. I don't want to make this about him at all. Following Stacy's death, a memorial scholarship was set up in her name. It's called the Stacy Davis Memorial Scholarship. High school seniors in Jackson County and the local area can apply and be selected for that scholarship. Also, a little random, the home that Stacy was murdered in, someone lives there. I know this because I was a mail carrier and I delivered to that house. And I recognize the house as being that house. And it actually kind of creeped me out. The lady met me at the door. She greeted me and she was smiling. And I was just like, in my mind, I'm like, do you know what happened here? But that house is still standing and it is occupied. So when I decided that I was going to do a crime channel, I always said that I was going to do this story first. I think it just because the nature of the crime, it just has really stuck with me. Obviously, I'm not the only person, and I actually found on her Find a Grave a couple messages as recently as last year that people posted. I think this post might have come from someone that was a classmate of hers, and it said, "I miss you, my friend. You're never far from my thoughts." And that was posted March 16th of 2025. There was another post on April 15th of 2025, and this person noted that she knew Stacy from Parkside Middle School, so I don't know if this was faculty or a classmate, but she wrote, "Stacy had a light so bright that the entire school was dimmed without her. My spirit was so moved from seeing so much love for her that I wrote a song to give to her family. Her light radiated so deeply through everyone's expressions of mourning that it helped unlock the newfound power of empathy within me. I will forever be grateful for your impact on our small Parkside Middle School community because it made me the deep, spiritual, loving person that I am today. Please continue to rest in all of peace, Stacy." And so I will close with that. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the end. To the friends and family of Stacy Lynn Davis, I hope life has treated you kind. And just by the postings I've read, she will never be forgotten and her light will continue to shine. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I appreciate you so much for listening to the end. If you haven't already, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. My intention is to upload a video each Friday from here on out. So I hope you join me again next week for another video from my hometown.